It's not only multiplied, it's squared. The power is tremendous. So after the books came out, I traveled all over the world. I would lecture all day long. Sometimes I'd lecture for a week, every day on a different part of the prophecies. And that was my job, was to tell people, if you have metaphysical groups, if you have prayer groups, any kind of a group that would meet regularly, if you can go back and just take 5 minutes out of that time to focus on the opposite of what he was predicting, we can keep these things from happening. And we can perform a miracle. And that's what he told me to do. And I was doing that for many years, all through the 90s, really. I think I stopped lecturing on it toward the end of the 90s. But during that time, a lot of these things did come true. And then now, the worst isn't. So I'm going to be playing a video, and I want you to show you what's going on here with that, because I'm coming up to all kinds of conclusions. But first, I do want to tell about some of the ones that have come true. People for years have been saying, I'm sitting here reading these books and watching it happen on television. That's how up-to-date it all is. The 2000 election, remember that election? Oh, yeah. Bush and Gore was in there in the minutest detail. Ever since the book came out, people kept calling me every time there was going to be an election. This is before the days of internet. And they would say, is this going to be the year of the hung jury election? I said, I don't know. All I know is what you got in the books. Because he saw an election that was what he called the hung jury election, as though it's so close you can't make a decision. And I probably should have brought it to read it, because there's such tricky symbolism. Nobody in all the scholars who have studied the prophecies have never come up with an answer like this. In the prophecy, it talks about the bones of the dead, and they come up with it, somebody, a ghost or something like that, and our haunted cemetery. And that's not anywhere near, it's his symbolism. So nobody has ever come up with the answers that we came up with. He said it would be an election, and it would be at a time when there would be a lot going on in the world, where it would be very important to be at a time of war. And this could be a very important election, but he said it would be so close that nobody could find the winner, and even the Congressional Congress would not be able to come up with a winner. And this is a whole page of this prediction. And some of you have read the book, so you know what I'm talking about, don't you? The ones who have read that prediction. And he said in there, an interesting thing, he said it would come so close that it might even cause a civil war, because everybody would be rooting for their candidate and to be very angry about it. And he said the only way a decision would be made would be after another election had occurred. Well, I think he saw all this counting of the ballots over and over again, and that's what he meant. But anyway, that one prophecy is extreme detail. And also, Bush was not supposed to win. He was not supposed to win. Gore was supposed to win. Can you imagine the difference in the last 8 years if Gore had got in there with his focus on ecology and the environment? What a difference the world would have been. But it was not supposed to be that way. Bush is predicted many times in the prophecies. And who would have known there was going to be two? Because some of the prophecies applied to the first one, and some of them applied to the second one. He doesn't say the name, but it's definitely this time period. And he talks about the wars in Iraq. All of that is in there. He also talked about the Monica Lewinsky scandal, which is interesting. But so some of these, you never know what's going to be in there, and it's only when it's happening you say, oh, that's what he's talking about. But another one that did happen was the 9/11. And it's funny, I was lecturing the night before the 9/11 happened, was in North Carolina. I've been there for some conferences, and I had one last talk at this little center with a small group before I was going to leave the next morning. And we're staying at this person's house overnight. That night, during the lecture, I was talking about the prophecies that dealt with that. Because in one of the prophecies, he definitely mentions the bombing of the Pentagon, and he says Pentagon in the prophecy. We were talking about this during the lecture. And the next morning we get up and here's showing on TV, with the bombing of the World Trade Center and all of that. An interesting thing about the prophecy about the Pentagon, you've probably been hearing all this controversies, conspiracy stuff that's been on emails and TV, is because a bomb will fall on the Pentagon. He never called it a plane or anything. And there's a controversy about that. Was it even a plane? Because the videos don't show a plane. Who's to say? He said it was a bomb in the Pentagon. Well, there'll be a lot of this, although we're ever going to know the answers to. But he did mention 9/11. He didn't mention the date, but he talked about hitting New York. And he said it's hard to say what's going to happen because he said this is going to be the first of many. There will be many attacks on New York after that. So it was hard to separate them out. But all of these things were definitely in the prophecies that were happening. There's so many, but those are the main ones that I've had. We tried to keep up with it, didn't we? For a while, we had it on the website, the ones that were the updates. And every time I would reprint the books, I would add to the back of volume 1 some updates. But it just got to be impossible to keep up with all of it. Then it was hard to do it on the website. So anyway, it just kept going and going. So a lot of what he focused on was the third Antichrist. He said there were 3 Antichrists. And I'm going to play a video, and a lot of this information will be in there, because he said he didn't like the term Antichrist. He said it sounded religious. But he said if you refer to Christ as humanity, that an Antichrist was someone who did something against humanity, a person who had no morals, and like he said, Genghis Khan or Attila the Hun. He said, actually, if you want to consider that, you could say there were 5 Antichrists, because he considered Attila the Hun and Genghis Khan is also this kind of a personality. So he said, if somebody like that, so the 3 Antichrists that he saw was Napoleon for his time period in France, and he has lots and lots of quatrains dealing with Napoleon. And also Hitler. And we had many, many of those. And when I was on the History Channel, they wanted me to name off these. I don't know what they're going to put in this program. For a while during the 1990s, I was on every show dealing with Nostradamus, every network, every documentary. There's so many out there. And now they're not calling on me as much because it's kind of fading away. But over the years then, I began working on my other books and lecturing on that, and I kind of got away from the Nostradamus material. But one thing he did say, this evil man who was supposed to be the 3rd Antichrist, he's supposed to come from the Middle East. We have his birth date, we have a drawing of him, and you're going to see it on the video. He said, this man would be the worst of all of them because he would study from Hitler and he would learn from his mistakes. And this was where we were supposed to be by the beginning of the 2000s into this horrible war. And I like to think that maybe we took another turn and went into a lesser. We have the wars, but not the wars he saw. He saw horrible things. He also saw a lot of experiments that were being done with weaponry, and some of those are being developed by our own government. He had many quatrains dealing with AIDS, and he told us how that developed, and it was a government weapon. And I told, and I've been noticing going on, I said, I can't write this stuff. They're going to hang me from the highest tree. But that was what I had to put together. But anyway, as he's going through all of this, he says, the Antichrist will eventually be defeated by the common, ordinary people. He called it the lice at his feet, what he thought was insignificant. He mentions Ogmios, who was an ancient Celtic Hercules, who is the leader of the underground, who is supposed to come against the Antichrist. And I kept thinking, wondering if this was going to happen or not, but Nostradamus said the Antichrist has been predicted as far back as the Bible. He's the beast in a Revelation, the beast with the number 666. And that deals with computers, and I'm also going to be going into that too. But those are the, does she? Okay. He said this is why this was a man, this was so horrible, we had to know about him so we could stop it from happening. But he said, the way that the history is going to go, the pendulum cannot swing all the way to the very evil man and stay there. It must swing back. And when it swings back, it's going to swing back to the time of the great genius, the wonderful man. He said, at that time, you'll be living in the 1,000 years of peace that's mentioned in the Bible. It'll be the wonderful time of, well, he said, the human body will be perfected to the point that it will never die. And we will have wonderful computer advances, and he didn't like computers. He was talking a lot about that. We'll be traveling in space, living in space, and he mentioned in the last half of volume 1, he mentions all of the wonderful inventions and things that are going to be coming during the time of the great genius. So I like to kind of think that maybe we are skipping over the real bad times and going into the time of the great genius. Who's to say? But I want to bring you up to that part. Okay, Greg, I think we can play the video now. This was a show that was on Sci-Fi Channel, and I really liked the way they put it together, so I kept it and I've used it.
World wars, man's landing on the moon, and the coming of a new Antichrist. Was Nostradamus warning people of the inevitable, or was he giving us the power to change our fate? Nostradamus lived in the 1500s, a time of fear and superstition, when plagues ravished the earth and the church ruled the fate of people. He had visions of mankind's terrible future and its own destruction. Not unlike our time, many people then believed that his predictions were satanic. The church would put him to trial.
That's him! That's Nostradamus!
You were accused of the worst of all crimes: black magic, alchemy, worship of the devil.
He would continue his work, however, feeling that it was his duty to inform us of our fate, so we could change it and create a better future for ourselves. His predictions that have come true. World War I and the beginning of communism. World War II, the rise of the Third Reich. Jewish massacres. The atom bomb attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And natural disasters. He also predicted the advancement mankind would make. The invention of aircraft, the first landing on the moon, and man's constant search for answers in space. These advancements will not go without mistakes, disastrous mistakes. The Vietnam War, a war out of control, and the Challenger, a dream shattered. Dolores Cannon is the leading expert on the Nostradamus predictions today. In 1986, something unexpectedly happened to her. As a past life hypnotherapist, she conducted what she thought would be a normal past life regression. A patient went back to a past life when she was a male student of Nostradamus. Nostradamus spoke through this patient.
and still have a hard time explaining what happened. He came through her and he said, I have an assignment for you. He could see that his prophecies were not being correctly interpreted. He said, the time is coming when they're going to come true.
I have to warn people. If they keep on like this, they will destroy everything. Nature, themselves.
Nostradamus gave Dolores the correct meanings of his predictions one by one. It took 3 years and 12 hypnotic subjects to complete the work. This was the first time that all Nostradamus' predictions have been translated. Almost 1,000. Nostradamus told Dolores Cannon to concentrate on the next 20 years.
20th century will be especially terrible. 3 wars will spread over the entire earth.
And we have shown now that some of the prophecies have already begun to come true.
In the world's history, thousands of people were killed by plagues, epidemics, illnesses with no cures. Not unlike our own time that has been struck with its own plague, AIDS. Nostradamus said that AIDS was a mutated disease, a form of rabies that originated from a monkey biting a woman who lived in Africa. The disease got into the blood mobiles and laboratories, contaminating biological products being made. AIDS will continue to spread worldwide. A cure is predicted about 15 years after the spread of this disease. The date of the Gulf War was given to Cannon long before it occurred.
He said, you don't know how important this is. This is the beginning of everything. This is actually the beginning of the Third World War.
This would instigate a few wars in the Middle East. The worst, however, is still to come.
There would be one man behind the scene during all of this time. This is the third Antichrist.
Nostradamus saw 3 antichrists in the course of Earth's existence. 2 were already predicted correctly, and we know them. Napoleon, Hitler. The third has already been born, and said to be the worst of them all. Nostradamus wanted our time period to know about the third Antichrist, so something could be done to stop him. This last Antichrist is the same entity referred to in the book of Revelation as the beast with the number 666. Nostradamus gave Dolores Cannon a detailed description of the third Antichrist and even a sketch drawing of him through the help of an artist. He was born on February the 4th, 1962, in Jerusalem. In 1987, he was a student at an Egyptian college specializing in computers, business, and philosophy. Presently, he is in the background of everything that is happening in the Middle East. He is described by Nostradamus as an extremely handsome man with tremendous charisma. At first, he will appear as a savior and the man with all the answers. But he will be the opposite of what he appears to be. He will be the sheep in wolf's clothing. His work is secretly done now. How many of us know him already? There were more events predicted for our future that Nostradamus wanted us to be aware of. The Nazi Party will slowly but surely return to power during the 90s. It will come to light that hurricanes are a man-made event brought about by scientists attempting to control the weather. The next 2 decades will mark the downfall of the Catholic Church. The Earth's continents will shift with the rising of the ocean's water levels. This could occur during the next 4 decades. These are just to mention a few. This all sounds like gloom and doom, but Nostradamus saw the amazing ability for the human being to adapt. We could handle the changes as long as they are occurring gradually, as they are now. Nostradamus also gave us a glimpse of a wonderful time to come. He saw a man whom he called the Great Genius, an important figure whose coming would balance out all the evil in the world. The great genius would invent great wonders, and he would reign in the 1,000 years of peace when we would be traveling through the cosmos and living in space colonies. One question remains to be answered, though. How could we explain all of this?
I want to bring out a very important point that really shakes people up. In my work with him, he was most emphatic by saying, you are not speaking to the dead when we are communicating. It's a concept of not simultaneous time, that there is no time.
We look upon Nostradamus as a mystery, but as facts prove, he was an extraordinary human being with an extraordinary talent. Could we prepare ourselves for Armageddon?
Nostradamus saw the end of the world, but he said it's so far in the future you don't need to worry about it.
Cannon merely sees herself as a reporter with only the well-being of mankind at heart. Nostradamus said that people underestimate the power of their own minds. He said that it is up to us to change the world's fate and create a better future for ourselves. How could we possibly ignore this?
Turn it off. Okay, turn it off, Greg. Okay, okay. But I did that about 10 years ago, I think. But one thing that's interesting in there, we did the stuff about AIDS, and I told them the real story of AIDS, that it was a government weapon that was developed. And they said, we won't be able to get on the air with that. So they adapted it and changed it. That was the only part that they did change. But he saw it being developed as a weapon of war because they said you couldn't, it was supposed to be like a germ warfare type of thing, but it got out of hand. It mutated and went over the edge. When that happened, there was no way the government or anybody else was ever going to take responsibility for it. Now, what he said in there about the cure would be found in 15 years, that did happen. It was not exactly a cure, but from the time we did all of this and did the work, 15 years later, they had reduced AIDS down to where it was no longer in the top 10 killers of the world. They had found enough drugs to put it under control. So that part did come true. Another part in there where they talk about the weather control. There's a whole lot of that in the books about the government enveloping weapons where they can control the weather and influence the weather. And it makes you wonder with all the stuff that's happening, the hurricanes and things like that. And if you know anything about the HAARP project, do you know about the HAARP project? The one in Alaska, that they are experimenting with weather and experimenting with the magnetic fields of the earth. There's a lot going on that we aren't aware of. I don't know if you know about my radio show. I have a weekly radio show. And I have all these people on the show, and I do have the man who wrote the book, Angels Don't Play This Harp. He was the one that exposed the whole thing, and we had him on the show. I wanted him to come and talk to this conference, but he couldn't get here this time. Maybe next year, anyway. He's got a lot of things that the government's doing that you really don't want to know. But the HAARP project's another one of the weather focusing machines. And so there's a lot of these things happening. So imagine when you're getting all this information, and it's pretty heavy stuff that I was receiving. And I didn't want it to believe it could happen, but then it begins to develop. Trying to think what else on there that has happened. Oh, definitely. Oh, he had the whole chapters and chapters on the Catholic Church. And I kept telling him, you're just wishful thinking, because he was being harassed by the Catholic Church during the time of the Inquisition. And I thought, that's all it is, you just don't like what you're living under. And he said, I do agree it's wishful thinking, but I'm only telling you what I see. And he kept saying the Catholic Church was built on sand, and it eventually would collapse. Interesting, what he said it would collapse from, he said it would collapse from within. And look what's happening with all the scandals that are happening. He said it would collapse from within. And it is being brought down. But he said in time now, as it begins to come down, religion will return to what it was supposed to be in the beginning. In my books in Jesus, you know, that was the way religion was supposed to be. And no one person over and everything telling people what to do. Nobody making rules and regulations about sins. None of that was ever supposed to be in there. It's not in the Bible originally. And so he said it would all return to the way religion was supposed to be when Jesus set it up 2,000 years ago. When Jesus set it up, he called it the way. And it was supposed to be having meetings just like this, and people in people's homes, and people sharing their knowledge and their abilities, teaching each other how to heal, and all about love. That was what religion was supposed to be. And that's what Jesus taught when he was doing his traveling. But man took everything and turned it around, changed it, and he ended up being crucified. They never understood what it was really all about. But Nostradamus said that religion will return the way it's supposed to be. So we're in for a whole wonderful thing when this, the great genius comes and we go into a whole new way of thinking. Yeah?
I remember you writing about how one of the popes was to be assassinated, and the next one would be poisoned, and then the third one would be the downfall of the church.
That'd be the last pope.
And can you see how that hasn't come true, how we've taken a different road?
That's what I'm wondering. Can you hear her okay? Because we got okay, and we thought nobody wants to come up to the mic, so she's talking about the predictions with the popes, because he saw all of the popes. And he did see that in this time period would be the last of the popes, that there was going to be 3, and the last one, when he was assassinated, that would be the downfall of the church. He called it the Pope of the Antichrist. But that's when I kept wondering, some of these things have not come true. And I kept wondering, well, does this mean all of this is wrong? I don't believe so, because some of them have come true. Then I got to thinking a while ago, he kept telling me over and over again, she's got her hand up here too, he kept telling me, remember that nothing is set in stone. The future is not in stone, it's malleable, it can be changed by man. One decision can change an entire timeline. And he kept saying, I want you to tell people how they can change the future. Maybe we've done some good, and we have changed it to where we're not following the worst case scenario. That's what I'd like to think, and that was what was coming to me this afternoon. It's not that it's inaccurate. I'm glad that it hasn't happened the way he saw it, because it was really horrible. Maybe it means we have turned a corner and are going into the time of the great genius and the wonderful things that he saw ahead of us. I like to think that. We don't want to have this war come. But he did say that the Antichrist had been seen since the Bible times. Does that mean he's still in the background and is just not being as effective, or what? He had a lot about the cabal, and I didn't even know what the cabal was when I was writing the books. It's the government behind the government. And he's got a great deal of prophecies dealing with that. And when I started lecturing on that, people were saying, you're talking about the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderbergers and the Rothschilds, and I didn't know any of that. But it was exactly what people had talked about, the government behind the governments all over the world. And he said they were descended from banking families going back hundreds and hundreds of years. And that now look at the banking things that are happening today. But this were the ones who were really controlling the governments. But see, a lot of these things I really didn't want to know. But here that I had to go out and lecture on all of this. So it was not what I wanted to do. But go ahead.
As I see it, Pope John Paul was supposed to be assassinated. But again, we had choice. And he wasn't assassinated because people around the world, Catholics and non-Catholics, prayed. And that could have been your assassinated Pope. Because really, he was at death's door.
You talk about the assassinating of the Pope? I always have trouble understanding when somebody's with the micro. What is she? She's my translator. Yeah, everyone.
The way she sees it is the one...
Use the microphone.
Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Am I any less distorted?
Okay, go ahead. When she sees it, what?
Okay, that Pope John Paul was assassinated. He was supposed to die, but he didn't because of the prayers.
Well, the
From
one
people.
who was only had the short, was only in there a month or so, Nostradamus said he was poisoned. And it was a poison that would appear to be like a heart attack. And that then the next one coming in, they couldn't control him, and that was why they poisoned him. But you know, there was the one, yeah, where he was supposed to have been, he was shot, wasn't he? And then he survived. So, you know, it takes all these twists and turns, because he had many quatrains about the city by the junction of the rivers at the time when the roses bloom was supposed to be at the time that the Pope would be assassinated. And, but some of these things have not happened. So, like I said, he sold us the worst case scenarios. Maybe we are avoiding it and we're going down the other road.
Did he ever say
What?
Did he ever say what his name meant?
Whose?
Nostradamus.
Whose name?
Did he ever say what his name meant?
Well, Nostradamus was Michel de Notre Dame.
Which means Our Lady.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But he was Jewish. He was raised with a Jewish family. We found out more about his biography than anybody has ever known. He was Jewish, and their family had to convert to Catholicism, or they would have been killed or driven out of France. So they changed to Catholic because they had to, and Nostradamus was never happy about that either. But there was, we learned a lot about his life and a lot about the conditions of that time that, to me, it was living history. But he also, let me show this one piece here before I get into this other. I have one little thing I want to show there. Let me say something first and then we'll show it. Okay, he saw a lot about computers. You got to remember, this was happening in 1986. I got my first computer in 1985. And you know those kind, if you remember them with the MS-DOS, and they were the very first computers. I was so afraid of that thing. I would be typing on it, type a chapter, and then I'd put it on save, and I'd go out of the room. And I couldn't stand to sit there, because sometimes it wouldn't save, it would destroy everything that I'd written. And I could see all these words floating out in cyberspace, you know. And so I'd push the button, and then I'd get out of the room until it saved it. And I would print it out immediately because I didn't know what it was going to eat the whole thing. So we didn't have much of a computers. This was the beginning. So here he's giving us information on computers. And he didn't like computers. He could see them. He said, man was giving up too much of his power to machines that we should be doing ourselves. And he didn't like it at all. But he saw the development of computers. And he saw the computers like we had. Then he saw computers that were going to be activated by voice. And you know, they are now. Then he saw computers that were going to be activated by thought. Well, in the last few years, this is happening because the Japanese discovered it. They did it for handicapped people. But they made it to where all they had to do is think to the computer and it would turn itself on and off. They're making all kinds of machines do the same thing. Just by thinking at the computer, you can tell it what to do. And I think that's amazing because they said it doesn't matter what language you speak. The thought is the thing. Now that's exactly how the ETs communicate. It has nothing to do with language, it has to do with thought. So they were kind of catching up with the ETs. But the Japanese have figured out how to do this by operating computers by thought. Now this is going to catch on because it knows it's going to spread. But the only problem is the government always turns these things around to weapons of war. But he saw that development. Then he saw the final computers were the organic computers. This is the ones that the great genius would be using. He said it would be able to replicate itself and take care of itself. And I said, organic sounds like something that's living. He said, it definitely is. And when I began to do research on it, in those days, they had developed one that was operated with bacteria. And they said they could take a cube the size of a dice, and it would hold all the information in the Library of Congress. And then they've been experimenting since with proteins. They said they're making it to process it just the way the body processes DNA and processes information to the brain. It'll be 1,000,000 times faster than any computer you're working with today, and it'll hold millions more information than you're doing today. And I've got a lot of information on this, articles and things that have been sent to me. Not too far in the future, a computer will be like nothing more than a bowl of water. That's how far in advance it is. But look what they're doing with all of the electronics. Look how small they're getting. So the computers will be able to be organic, living. A little creepy. But when he was trying to explain all of this, you know, Brenda had no words for this. I didn't have any words for it because it didn't exist. And I kept thinking, here in 1985, I said, oh yeah, maybe in 100 years, these things would come true. At 5 years, they began to be developed. 10 years, they were being developed. So he was, that's scary. He was way ahead of his time. Now, we're going to, yeah, he's got, well, I'll tell you about that in a minute. Before we're done, I'll tell you that. Okay, let me finish this thought first. He saw the World Wide Web before it was ever invented. He didn't have a name for it. Nobody did in those days. He saw it like the world with all of these strings and cords wrapped all around the world. It was all like a mass of strings. And he said it would all be into a central computer somewhere that would control the whole entire things. And when I was lecturing on that, one place, somebody said, I think it was somewhere in Europe, they got a gigantic computer. It's called the Beast, that is supposed to operate the entire system. But he described the World Wide Web exactly. Okay, Greg, put this one up here. Okay, this is something that one of my readers sent to me after the books came out. And usually when I show this, people want to write it down. This is numerology, and people say, that's not numerology. It's not the numerology as we know it. It's the numerology from thousands of years ago, the Chaldean Hebrew Kabbalah system of numerology. This woman tracked this down. World Wide Web reduces to 666, and www releases to 666. No matter how you break it down, it comes up to 666, World Wide Web. I wonder if that was by accident or not. Because you know in the book of Revelation, that's what it says, that 666 is the number of the beast. And I quote it in the book because it talks about computers. That eventually nobody will be able to buy, sell, or do anything without the mark. Without the number. Everybody will have a number, which has happened, and we'll need that, and that's where they talk about the mark of the beast, and it goes back to 666. Who would have thought that? This came from a woman in Australia, I think it was. So it's interesting. I wonder if when they come up with the World Wide Web, if they knew numerology or not. Who knows?
Dolores, may I make a comment? In the Hebrew alphabet, the sixth letter is Vav, which is V or W. So VVV or Vav would be 666. One more time.
Does that make sense then?
Exactly the same.
Because I don't know that system, and people said it's not numerology, it's a different kind of numerology. Okay, you can take it down now. Okay, but I think that's fascinating. And thanks for giving us that little bit of information there because I know you do know languages, and you think it is accurate then. But is it by accident, or did they know that when they were first in developing all of this? Who knows? What? It makes you wonder, is anything coincidence or not? Okay, we've only got another 15 minutes. There you can see how there's so much with this. I talked for a long time. Okay, he was asking about 2012. Well, Nostradamus talked about the shifting of the world. He gave us the maps in Conversations Volume 2 of what the world would look like. Because he said the world would not have to tilt, but just a little bit for the continents to start to shift and the tectonic plates to move. And once they begin moving, they would displace a lot of water. And there'd be a lot of flooding. And continents would go down and continents would be pushed up. And there were some places, I ended up with maps of the entire world because I wanted that rather than just the United States. Some places he said, I looked at these maps and I said, this doesn't make sense. I could see where mountains would be above water, but there were some parts of the United States that should not have been above water. He said that's because the tectonic plates will push against each other, force the land mass up as much as 1,000, 2,000 feet. This area is one that's going to be safe. It will be forced up over 1,000 feet. This area, isn't that weird? My son said, well, that means we're going to be okay, isn't it? I said, no, there'll be earthquakes, there'll be, oh, if you can hold on, I guess, there's all going to be all kinds of violent activity. But he describes the worst things you could imagine as the continents shift and as the increase in, he did say, talking about the government controlling everything, he said, watch the weather. He said, first there will be earthquakes where they've always occurred. Then there will be earthquakes where they've never occurred before. And he saw machinery that would be in airplanes, and they would be beamed at the earth and can create earthquakes. Then he said, watch the ring of fire, the reawakening of the volcanoes. Some of them have been dormant for hundreds of years. All of these things have been happening during the 20 years that I've been working on this. And then he said the weather will become increasingly strange. In one of the quatrains, they call it mistake of the month. He said it would be areas that were normally cold would be hot and vice versa. There's several quatrains dealing with that. He talks about periods of drought. In one quatrain is the year without a rainbow, which he talks about the droughts. Then he talks about flooding. It's a great deal dealing with the weather. So all of this about the shifting of the earth, during that time I was getting phone calls and letters from people saying, should I move? Where should I move to? I got to get my son out of San Francisco. And I said, I can't tell you what to do, where to go. That's your responsibility. I said, just follow your instincts. You'll be where you're supposed to be. Follow your instincts. If you feel you should move, then move. If you feel you should stay, then stay. I know we're having a lot of increase of population moving into this area. And I don't know where they're getting these vibes or what it is, but definitely California's going down, Florida's going down, all of those areas. And so who's to say? But anyway, there's a great deal about the shifting of the earth, and I got to wondering about that. But then what I think is happening now, in my books on the convoluted universe, I'm getting into the new earth, the changing of the vibrations and the frequencies as we move into the new earth. And they say we're going to leave the old earth behind. There's going to be two earths. Now, Annie's not in here, is she? Annie, are you here, Annie Kirkwood? Is she outside? Ask her to come in a minute. I always quote her, so let me see if she I haven't seen her in years, and I'm always quoting her if she can remember the vision. But he talks about the shifting of the earth. She might be out there. Maybe she left her booth already. Annie, come up here. Okay. Because he talks about the vibrations and the frequencies of the earth shifting and moving, and we will be going into a whole new earth. But there's going to be two earths. And what I think, I'm always quoting you. I said I might as well quote you with you sitting here. Come over, sit down here for a minute. We're almost done anyway. Come over and sit down. We're almost done anyhow. Okay. Because I quote you, and I'm going to make sure I got it right.
Okay.
Okay. But we're talking about the shifting of the earth and the two earths and how they separate. And I was thinking this may be what Nostradamus was seeing, because he kept seeing all this destruction and the violent things happening. I think that's the old earth.
Yes. But the two are separating was a vision that was.
That's what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
Because in my lectures and in the books, I quote Annie. Now, if you know Annie Kirkwood, she wrote Mary's Message to the World. Remember that book?
Long time ago.
And it was very popular at the time. We were on panels together and doing lecturing everywhere. And this was in the beginning of the talk of the new earth and the old earth, and it's very complicated to understand. So we were on this panel, and you talked about your vision, where you saw the earth separating. Tell them what that.
I saw that. You remember the old Sherman Williams commercial with the earth, the globe, and the paint dripping down on it? I saw that globe, and then all of a sudden the paint was gone, and it started pulling apart, almost like a chromosome does.
A cell?
And the chromosome in the cell, where it pulls apart and the strands are still holding on. And my sister does not believe in any of this. In fact, she was quite upset because of all the things that were happening to me. And so when they started pulling apart, I heard her say, see there, everything that she said didn't come true because we're still okay. But she was on one earth and I was on the other.
The two separate balls. And then you heard the ones over here.
Yeah, over here we're saying, hey, it all happened just like they said it was going to.
We did it.
We were real happy. Yeah.
So that's why it's very complicated. It's hard to understand.
It's very hard. It's still hard to understand. It's a little bit easier because we know more about cells, and we hear the word cellular and all that, DNA. And we know that there's so much more that we don't know. We acknowledge that. But in the early 90s, that still was not acknowledged. And so it was very hard. And people thought I was speaking to the devil. I had lots of them tell me I was talking to the devil, that was not Mary. And I can't prove it. So I asked her about it. And she said, you don't have to do anything about skeptics. I could come down and sit with them and talk to them, and they still wouldn't believe me.
But the idea of two earths is really difficult for people to understand. And I'm still trying to explain it. I'm writing about it, but that doesn't mean I have all the answers. He was asking about 2012, and what I'm getting, that's why I think the Nostradamus prophecies are not wrong. They're predicting the old earth, because they said those who stay with the old earth will stay with what they created in the old earth. And that's what that will be. They'll be in the disaster and the tsunamis and the earthquakes and all of that. And we're moving into the new earth. And what I've been told, not with Nostradamus, but in my other work, is 2012 is the culmination. It doesn't mean that's the end. People are always saying it's the end of the world. It's the end of the world as we know it. But it's moving on. And by 2012, we're in the middle of it right now. And 2012 will be the culmination of it, when it all comes to the height.
I like to think of 2012 as being the beginning.
Beginning of everything. And people say, well, how do I know if I'm going or not? Well, I was told if you're interested in this at all, you're assured you're going. It's the ones who are still in the negativity. They're the ones, their vibration can't change that quickly. They'll be stuck with the old earth. So it's going to be, we're living in a very exciting time. A lot of interesting things are happening right now.
Also, if you think about our bodies and how the cells divide and how we grow from two little cells, like two little entities that are the sperm and the ova that get together and become one cell, and from that we have evolved to where we are now, millions and millions of cells. And that same principle is the principle that God has used to grow the universes, because there are more than one. Mm-hmm. And so,
well, I tell people too, within your own body is a universe.
Yeah.
That's why you can heal yourself. That's why you can control the diseases, because you talk to your body, you talk to the cells. And when you do, you are the voice of God. And the body will listen, because you have a universe within you. It's just coming to a different way of thinking.
Yes, it is.
But I'm always quoting you every time I talk about this, and I wanted you to make sure we got it correct anyway, on that vision, because
it was a vision.
I never forgot that vision, and it is in my book. I talk about it. And you want to take this? The amazing thing was, when I was lecturing on this at one time, I think it was a conference in Laughlin, I don't remember, a man in the audience came up to me afterwards, and he said, I got to tell you this, I'm a businessman, and this doesn't happen to me. But he says, as I was quoting that vision you had with the earth pulling apart, said suddenly the auditorium disappeared, I was out in space. I saw it happening, just like that. So he went home and he recreated it on the computer. And he sent me his drawing of it. The one is just over the other. One is glowing. And so he said I could use it in the book as long as I didn't tell anybody what his name was. So it is in, I think it's convoluted 2. We have that picture of that. So, I don't know, truth is stranger than fiction.
Yes, yes.
That's for sure. Okay.
There's somebody
Okay. You want to go back, or are you okay?
I'm okay.
All right, we're almost done anyway.
I'm okay.
Okay.
Maybe if you want me up here.
Okay. Thanks for coming in.
Do you want me to tell her, or you want me to say?
We're almost done anyway, just got a few more minutes.
Hi.
Hi.
Well,
I would just like to confirm what you're saying from another tradition, which is the Mayan. My passion in recent years has been the Mayan calendar.
yes, that's what I lecture on about 2012.
And what I have discovered is that there are 2 world trees. The old world tree, the new world tree. There were 2 creators, and the new world tree is being prepared, and little by little, those of us that are at that level of consciousness are moving into that second world tree.
Okay, I only got part of that, but I do want to tell you, in the book, I had regressions where people went back to the time of the Mayans. And you know, the Mayans disappeared, and there were Indian tribes too, like the Anisaki, that disappeared. These people went back to when they were there when this happened. So you know what happened? They evolved to the point they shifted. The whole civilization changed their vibration and frequency. They moved into this other dimension. But they could see the future. So they saw the next big event would be when the whole world shifted into the other dimension, and that's why they stopped their calendar at 2012, because that was supposed to be when they saw it all happening to the world. So that's what 2012 means in the Mayan calendar. It doesn't mean the end of the world, it means we're moving, and we're going to go the same place they did, into another dimension. They said they set the way for us to follow. So I have some very fascinating regressions anyway. Okay, we just got a few more minutes. Yeah, who's back there?
And Annie, yeah, this is the end of you having, communication with Virgin Mary, or are you going to continue?
I don't understand.
We can't understand it. Could she, Julie, what is she saying?
Yes, sir. She's going to continue.
Yeah.
Well, Julie is translating.
This is for Annie. If she's wondering if you will be continuing your communication with Mary.
I have no idea. She comes when she wants.
And Dolores, one question.
Oh, Annie is going to get back into lecturing again, and you said, yeah, I'm going to make sure.
Please do.
Oh, when Byron died, she kind of put everything on hold. But now I think she said she's ready to start writing again and getting back into the flow. I think she's ready, don't you?
Fast.
She had a big contribution. You can't just let it slide. You got more to do.
And Dolores?
Yeah?
When I was talking to you last week, I remember you were talking that the computer are going to, you just going to think and they will do, you know, through your thought. You know when you were saying that now?
Well, Julie will tell.
You're talking about when you said how the computer will work from your thoughts.
But computers will work with what?
What you said about computers? What you said about computers?
The thought, yeah.
With the thought, okay.
Yeah, the Japanese developed that, yeah.
Yeah, remember in the regression that I was driving a machine with my thought. Remember that? So that was really in old reincarnation. That was already made already before we came here.
In her regression that you did with her, she was driving the car with thought, by thought. So it was already
Well, they're
happening
already
in that.
doing it with planes, you know, the jet planes. Have you heard about that? They said because the jet planes go so fast, they can't do it with controls. They're doing it with their mind.
With their mind.
Yeah. So we're on the way to that. It's happening.
Yeah.
They got somebody up here, Julie, that has a question too.
Yes.
Okay, we just have 2 more questions and then we got to stop. Yeah, go ahead.
Dolores, do you have any information on Planet X?
On what?
Planet X.
Planet X.
Planet X, forget it. I know where the guy got the idea. He had a regression with me, and there was never any Planet X mentioned, but he come up with the whole idea. No, the Planet X is supposed to be based on Nombre by Zachariah Sitchin. And in the Nostradamus books and even in the Jesus books, they saw another planet. There was actually 10 planets in the solar system. One of them had an elliptical orbit. But there never was any mention of disaster. It's just one that comes around every now and then. It doesn't mean there's any disaster with it. I wouldn't put any stock in it. You got the mic? Okay.
Yes. Did he say anything about autism in children?
About what?
Autism in children.
He didn't, but I can tell you a lot about it. Okay. We're out of time. Okay. I have a lot of doctors for clients, and they tell me things you don't want to know. And they have told me, Deb, they're getting out of medicine. They're going over into alternative healing and natural medicine. I work with alternative healing all over the world, especially in Russia. And these doctors have told me that the autism is definitely caused by the vaccinations and the shots. And there's one doctor that I've been working with who has curing autism. He said it can be cured. He has a clinic in Tennessee. And he said in 1 day can make the huge difference of following his treatments. It all has to do with diet. You got to get that mercury and the stuff poisons out of the body, and the child can be cured of autism. So a lot of people, if they're interested, we say call our office, and the names are on our Rolodex of these doctors that we work with. There's a lot going on. I guess I'm stuck in the middle of it. Okay, I think we're run out of time, but okay. Thank you. It's a sign you're supposed to get back into it.
Yes.
Okay. No, I'll be okay. Okay. Thanks for coming in.